it's great to be here in beautiful Lenox to talk about our plan for historic investments in the roads, bridges, and flood-preventing culverts of Berkshire County. I'd like to begin by thanking Town Manager Jay Green, Town Administrator Catherine Warden, all of the local officials from across Berkshire County who've joined us today, as well as Mayor Peter Marchetti of Pittsfield, who's made the trip down. With us, we have Representative Lee Davis and members of our team, our administration, Secretary of Transportation Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, MassDOT Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, District Highway Director Francisca Hemming, Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs Rebecca Tepper, Undersecretary of Decarbonization and Resilience Catherine Antos, Fish and Game Commissioner Tom O'Shea, Director of the Division of Ecological Restoration Beth Lambert, our Rural Affairs Director Ann Goby, and our Director for Western Massachusetts Kristen Aleko. A lot of names, a lot of people, all on our administration and all working for you. We came here today to listen to our local officials, to listen to local communities. We just had a robust conversation about the needs of the region and what the impacts of state neglect have been over the years. We know that roads and bridges are in need of repair and modernization. Residents need better transportation. Communities need better protection from severe wind and flooding. And ultimately, this region needs and deserves more attention and more investment from the state to these needs than ever before. That's what our new transportation funding plan is about. We propose to invest $8.4 billion over the next 10 years to put our state's transportation system on strong new foundations. This includes a 50% increase, annual increase, in Chapter 90 funding for local roads. That would deliver greater equity for Western Mass communities, including the Berkshires. For example, a 62% increase for Lenox, and I want to thank Jay Green for serving on our Chapter 90 working group. Our plan also includes a critical and long overdue investment in climate resilience, $200 million to replace culverts and upgrade culverts, as well as small bridges that are so critical to preventing floods. In the last 2 years that we've been in office, we've seen severe flooding across the state and especially here. And we know how hard it is for local officials, including many of you volunteers, and local residents to work to find the resources to deal with these serious, serious issues. So we've been determined to work to try to get you the help that you need, and we're determined to do things differently than they've been done in the past, because we're an administration and a team that doesn't believe in kicking the can down the road, which has happened for far too long. I also want you to know that we're making this proposal, almost $8.5 billion over 10 years, without raising taxes, okay? This is using existing revenue and leveraging that to access more capital. Smart fiscal management to design a transformative investment, which is exactly what our local officials have to do every single day with budgets that are increasingly tough. We're also working closely right now with our state legislature to get this passed. But I want you to know that I recognize that Berkshire County contributes more than their share to our state's tourism economy, cultural output, natural resources, and food production. You deserve a better deal from the state than you had been getting over decades. And you also deserve to have communities that are safe from flooding. I now want to invite up our Secretary of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, to say a little bit more.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you all for coming here to meet with us today to talk about these incredibly important issues. I talk a lot about my two favorite things. One of them is culverts, and the other is Chapter 90 funding. We know how important this funding is for our communities, whether we're talking about advancing our climate resilience or really focusing on our biodiversity and the priorities of each of you. Chapter 90 funding will improve connectivity, transportation, and more importantly, access. This isn't just for the people here, but it's also for the ecosystems around us. Resilience means attention to detail, strategically placing our culverts, constructing much-needed flood barriers, and deploying mitigation assets to protect against extreme weather. Every project must have a clear resiliency plan to prepare for the climate change challenges that we know are coming. Resilience also requires collaboration. We work closely with our partner agencies to plan for our future, and we are strongest when we are working together, which is why events like this are so incredibly important. Our resilience improvement plan includes climate vulnerability assessments, adaptation training and guidance, resiliency screening for projects, updated design standards to integrate climate resilience, prioritizing resilience-focused infrastructure projects, tunnel flood mitigation programs, and emergency response planning updates. We know that prioritization is critical. We are focusing on condition, flood risk, and biodiversity impact. 60% of our CIP projects will improve infrastructure resilience. That includes replacement of culverts and catch basins for stormwater along all our state-owned roadways. By coordinating these projects with our fellow agencies and the communities, we will improve water quality, protect our natural resources, and make our roads and bridges not only safer, but more resilient to these severe storms. Planning for the future means protecting public safety, as many people brought up here today. And it's also about safeguarding our infrastructure and enhancing our climate resilience. We have a very clear strategy for culvert replacement and maintenance. We look forward to working with all of you in this whole government approach, which Governor Healey and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll constantly talk about. This is a team effort, and we need to be the best team members we can to be as responsive to all of you to make sure that you are being heard. I want to thank Governor Healey and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for bringing these agencies together to ensure that Massachusetts is prepared for all of the challenges that we have ahead. So I want to thank you for taking the time to let us come talk with you. I really appreciate the feedback. We especially look forward to coming back out here. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Energy and Environmental Affairs Secretary Rebecca Tepper.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Administrator, for your partnership. It truly has been a real partnership between our teams on this, and it is the all-of-government approach that Secretary Tibbetts was talking about. I did want to point out one other person who's here today, who is Carrie Banks, who is the person on the ground at the Department of Environmental Restoration. What's the name of it? Where is she? There we go. Division of Ecological Restoration, who I know you know from the work that she's done, so thank you for being here. So I'm very grateful to be here, to have an opportunity to hear from so many of the local officials. We heard loud and clear that municipal officials are working hard to keep up with extreme weather, but you need help. Our roads and bridges and culverts were all built decades ago, and many are not ready for the weather we are experiencing today or will be facing tomorrow. We know the extreme rainfall we saw in 2023. That could become 8 times more likely at the end of the century due to climate change. Making these investments today is a down payment on our future. Every dollar that we invest today in climate resilience infrastructure will save us $13 in avoided damages and costs down the line. Resilient infrastructure reduces the costly repairs for our local leaders and helps our local economies grow. Culverts in particular, our favorite topic is all culverts. We all like culverts here. In particular, are really a major area of concern. They are everywhere. Whenever a road crosses a stream, there's a culvert. Many of them are over 50 years old and undersized. They're designed for weather of the past, not the future. When they fail, it can lead to flooding that disrupts lives, closing roads impacting schools and threatening public safety, as we heard from the municipal leaders this morning. And you have seen it firsthand. Right here in Beckett, there's a culvert that was too small to handle rainstorms. In just 6 years, the culvert washed out 3 times, taking the road with it. But in 2027, the culvert was rebuilt with a larger, safer structure that doesn't flood and is better for fish and wildlife. So we've been leading the way on culverts at EEA for multiple programs. I know you all know our favorite program was Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which takes these issues head on. Last year we awarded $52 million to help cities and towns recover from flooding and to build resilience to climate risk. This included $5 million specifically for upgrading culverts to handle more extreme weather. Our Division of Ecological Restoration provides cities and towns with technical assistance, funding, and training opportunities. Since the start of its Culvert Replacement Municipal Grant Initiative in 2017, DER has replaced more than 120 culverts in 90 municipalities, including 13 communities here in Berkshire County. Just last year, DER awarded a record of $4.8 million to replace undersized culverts in 37 cities and towns across the state. And thanks to our Berkshire Clean Cold Connected Partnership with regional planning and watershed groups, we have many more projects on the way. We are excited up here to be teaming with you and with the Department of Transportation to pinpoint and replace culverts that are likely to fail. This work is a win-win for people and nature, and acting now will save us a lot of money in the long run. Strong, resilient infrastructure keeps our communities safe and keeps our local economies thriving. I am now going to turn it over to our host, Lennox Mayor Jay Green. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, Mayor Marchetti, but apparently there's another mayor in the room today. So. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I have the privilege of standing up here today and representing and being the voice for Berkshire County municipalities. I can assure everyone that we belong to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are proud to be part of the Commonwealth, and although sometimes we feel as though we may not be or forgotten, days like today remind us that we are. And thank you, Governor Healey and your team, for making the effort to come out here and reminding us that we all are in this together and it's a partnership. Chapter 90 is an integral program. That's my favorite program to talk about. And we had a lot of chatter about Chapter 90, at least for the last 6-7 years that I've been back in municipal government here in the Berkshires. And that program is so important for communities here in the Berkshires. Some communities have the ability to augment their road miles, their funding, through local funds, but most do not. My previous community relied on Chapter 90 for many different items, to the point where we almost depleted it every year because we bought equipment, we paved roads, we paved for engineering. It's a diverse program, it's a flexible program, but we felt as municipal officials and DPW staff, it was starting to get stale. I've said before, I'll continue to say this again, we had an opportunity to participate in an advisory group to modify that. This administration listened. Secretary of DOT listened, her staff listened, and we are humbled that they heard our concerns and implemented that in a very short period of time, and for that we are very grateful. Being in public service, we often talk about how much money we spend on engineering reports and design, and they sit on the shelf, or a master plan, and they sit on the shelf and we don't act on them. So I know it sounds like colloquialism, but it's true. This time around, it didn't sit on the shelf. We're here because of the effort to implement that. I asked Bill Gopp, Bill, our DPW superintendent, to park one of our new single-axle trucks out in the parking lot, because it's important as we talk about culverts, as we talk about bridges, and we talk about roads, we also forget that Chapter 90 allows us to buy equipment that we otherwise may not be able to afford. So if you want to go out and take a good look at a brand new piece of equipment before it starts to go in service, we did that today. So in my closing remarks, thank you, Governor Healey, and your team for being here. Thank you, my colleagues here in the county, for all the feedback that you've provided us. And let's continue to work together and modernize and make contemporary our transportation policy here in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
So just a rousing applause for the folks that are up here doing such good work with the administration, and I really appreciate the work. Coming from a municipal level and now coming in as your state rep, I can really see behind the scenes and behind the curtain that there is a lot of listening and a lot of progress being made. The reworking of the formula for Chapter 90, focusing on road miles, just that's a game changer. And that is something that rural Mass really, really appreciates. I love culverts, but I love bridges more. So I'm going to be focused. I have a bill actually calling for the renewal of the accelerated bridge program, and we might have a discussion about that later. But with Great Barrington, we have seen our share of bridge issues, and looking at the issues with Brookside and then with the Kellogg Bridge in Sheffield. This is a good example of what a program could do in terms of addressing the issues of bridges and culverts. So I appreciate the work of this team, and I appreciate everyone's input. It does make a difference, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Rep. Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Administrator. And thank you to our secretaries. Happy to take any on-topic questions. All right. Well, you have one? Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm somebody who grew up in a small town in New Hampshire and a rural community, and as governor, I have said from the outset that we need to do a better job as a state of making sure that we take care of Berkshire County and Western Massachusetts. And I think over time, this state has not invested what it should in Berkshire County and in Western Massachusetts. We're different, and we came in as an administration with a commitment to do that. This is an example of that. Convening this task force on Chapter 90 resulted in us changing the funding formula for Chapter 90. That means more money to Berkshire County towns and cities for roads, bridges, culvert repair, general infrastructure, and resilience. And it's just an example of how we're thinking and operating. Today was very important for us to be on the ground. We're a team that does best when we're on the ground listening to people and hearing directly from local residents, local officials who are doing incredibly hard work about how we can work together and maximize taxpayer dollars for the greatest return for the residents of Berkshire County and Western Massachusetts. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I made this a priority and announced that we were going to do something as a state that's never been done before. And we're going to use existing revenue, what we have through a surtax, you may remember, that came into play a couple years ago, and we're going to use that revenue and leverage it to access more capital so that I can stand here before you and say we can spend nearly $8.5 billion over the next 10 years on bridges, roads, and transportation infrastructure. So that's one thing I want to commit to the public. The other thing is you have the commitment of our team, of our Highway District Administrator, Francesca Hemming, of our Highway Administrator, Jonathan Gulliver, and his team through the work of Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt and DOT is listening about what needs to happen. And I welcome him to say more about this, but I understand what it means to have a bridge shut down, to have to do a detour, what it means for people's quality of life, importantly, what it means for emergency services and public safety, first and foremost. So what we want to do with this new funding stream is figure out, prioritize. At this point, it's prioritizing because the number of projects are endless that need to be done. So we've got to work together and work with communities to prioritize the work and then to eliminate red tape to innovate and be willing to do things differently in this time of urgency. And I have every confidence in Administrator Gulliver that he and his team can do that, working with communities like Great Barrington.
So to the particular bridge that you're talking about, you know, I think this is a great example of why the governor's team has put together like this budget to address issues like you're talking about with that particular bridge. That bridge was originally planned to be a repair project or a preservation project, as we call it. So that's why the lower price. When we started getting into it more, and this happens across Massachusetts, we discovered that the bridge was not at a point that a repair was something that was feasible. It had deteriorated too much. So it moved from being what we would consider a preservation or repair project into a complete replacement. That's why you're seeing such an increase in cost. And again, this is not something that's unique to Great Barrington. It happens all over Massachusetts, where when we start getting into projects, we discover things that were not apparent when we first did our inspections. So those inspections lead to us wanting to put a bigger project in that is right-sized for whatever bridge replacement we're doing, and that does drive cost up, but it's also necessary. We have one of the oldest bridge systems in Massachusetts, and the governor's budget puts aside about $1.5 billion for bridges over the next few years. It is crucial money that is going to help us address issues like you're experiencing right now in Great Barrington, where right now, without that money means that we're struggling to reprogram other projects to get the money into a project like that. So that's the answer on that specific project. It's a little bit more of a complicated answer to your question. So the answer is indirectly yes, because what it does, that reprogramming that I was just talking about, having that pool of money that we can now put right towards a structurally deficient bridge, especially ones that are closed, rather than really turning over all the couches looking for the change to put towards a project. We don't have to do that with this extra money that the governor's put together in her budget. And it allows us to program out those ones that we know are in need. We're also working, as I mentioned earlier, with Secretary Tepper's team to see how we can try to move some of the permitting on some of those projects forward in a way that also makes some sense, so that we can try to accelerate a lot of those projects.
We're good? Okay. Good question. No, I mean, this is funding that is state funding, and when I proposed a budget, it's a budget that we know will be funded by state revenues. Of course, we rely a lot on federal funding, and that's why I've been talking about my concerns with what's going on with the cuts to federal funding, and I've applauded the actions by the attorney generals around the country to stand up for states to say, hey, you can't just take away our funding, this is funding that Congress actually appropriated to come to our states for important things like transportation and infrastructure work. So, I'm going to continue to advocate for the people of Massachusetts. It makes sense for states, not just Massachusetts, states all over the country to continue to receive these important funds. But what we're talking about today is state funding through the Chapter 90 program. And as you can tell, the charge to our team and to our administration is we want to get this stuff done as quickly as possible. We want to move through these projects as quickly as possible. One, because we want the quality of life to improve for residents in Berkshire County and around the state. And two, because it doesn't get any cheaper to do this stuff later. And frankly, that's what all these poor folks here are having to deal with. It's not having had the money and the funds to do basic maintenance, and then you end up in a situation where you move from a repair to a complete rebuild, right? But we got really smart people here, who are thinking about this in the right way, and I think about, Kathy, your comment from Beckett, it doesn't make sense to be doing 2 culverts when we need a small bridge. So let's be smart about these things, and I know the collective wisdom, in this room and reflected in the leadership of Berkshire County officials, working with our team in the state, will do a much better job together, and I'm hopeful about that. Thank you.